Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Xiaolin Perspectives, and today we're going to be discussing episode 2 of Xiaolin Showdown, Like a Rock. Now, if last week's episode was meant to lay down the blueprints for the show to follow as it went along, well, today's episode is the one where they start building up from those blueprints. Case in point, the episode actually begins with our four main characters as they're in the middle of a training exercise. Specifically, they're going through an obstacle course with the end goal being to get the dog. Ultimately, getting through the obstacle course is no easy task, as they have to dodge over fake crocodiles, climb walls, dodge saw blades, and even go through a quote-unquote ring of fire, it's fake fire, but still, to save a toy dog, and the end goal is to get through it as fast as possible, with Omi typically having the highest record since he's obviously the most well-trained. However, his record quickly gets broken, as after he goes through and saves the dog, it's Clay's turn, and, well, he just kind of doesn't do the obstacle course. Basically, he sees this obstacle course as the end goal of this obstacle course as just to get the dog. So what does he do? He starts at the starting point, then turns around, grabs the dog, and comes right back. Which everyone kind of calls him out on because, well, the whole point of the obstacle course is to get through the obstacle course. The dog should be the end goal, yes, but it's how you get there. And everyone thinks that he's supposed to go through doing all the punches, kicks, and flips and all that shit, which of course he didn't do. So they kind of start ridiculing him, with even Raimundo saying that he has an old man kung fu since, well, he's supposed to be a Xiaolin dragon of Earth, which Omi even starts picking up on as he starts laughing and going on to explain the joke, which I'll talk about when I get to character stuff and I'm done with this plot summary. But as he's laughing, Master Feng comes along, and rather than joining the Xiaolin monks in chastising Clay, he actually congratulates Clay, as he believes that this is actually a rather impressive way to solve everything. Mostly because, in his own words, being a Xiaolin monk is more than just punching, kicking, and flips and shit. It's also about finding simple solutions to complicated problems. And in Clay's case, he did get the dog in the end. Yeah, he didn't do it the traditional way, but he still did it. So he actually applauds Clay's thinking outside the box mentality. However, the lesson is quickly cut short as Dojo comes up saying a new Shengang Wu has revealed itself. A Shengang Wu called the Fist of Tebigong, which is supposed to be a glove that really packs a literal punch. As such, the Xiaolin monks all gear up to go and get it, and it's here we learn what they do with the Shengang Wu that they collect. On the grounds of the temple, there is a vault. And basically, while the main floor of the vault is a sitting room where all those nameless monks we saw last episode typically meditate and do their own thing, below that is, well, the actual vault, which is opened via a combination of ringing bells in a certain way, which ultimately opens up a hidden staircase which goes down with all the Shengang Wu having their own personal shelves. And, well, basically every time the Shaolin monks have to go out and do their duty, they very much just they just arm themselves with whatever Shengang Wu they can find and then head out. Though in this case, since they only have three, all three of the four Shaolin monks are armed while one is bereft. And in this case, the one that's bereft is Omi, mostly because he and Raimundo started fighting over the Eye of Dashi, and Master Feng settled the argument by saying that the one who won the obstacle course should get it. In other words, Clay. As such, Raimundo gets the Mantis Flip coin, while Kimiko gets the 2-ton tunic, and Omi gets jack shit, with Master Feng telling them that if he wants a Shengang Wu too, then they should go get the Fist of Tebigong. In the meantime, we cut over to Gay Pali, France, as we see Jack Spicer just sitting down and enjoying a cup of tea. And it's here we see that, sometime off screen, Jack Spicer managed to find another Shengang Wu, specifically a sash called the Third Arm Sash, which, as the name implies, kind of gives you a literal third arm. Now, it's not like a third arm grows out even, no, it's more like the sash acts like a third arm that you can control just as easily as your others. Of course, Wuya thinks that Jack using it like this is stupid, childish. He's misusing the power of a Shengang Wu, and on top of that, the Fist of Tebigong has revealed itself, and it's here we see that she can actually sense these things, and that Jack needs to go out and get it before the Xiaolin monks. However, Jack says that they'll be fine, that he let him just finish his tea and then he'll go, but as Jack's doing this, well, a mime comes up and starts bugging him, with Jack just telling him to go walk against wind somewhere, and when the mime starts miming walking against wind, Jack gets annoyed and walks away, before the mime pretends to throw a lasso and actually ties Jack up, which surprises the evil boy genius, well, before Jack can retaliate, Wuya tells him that maybe they can use this mime, because clearly this thing has magic powers, and which it further demonstrates by chucking an invisible golf ball right into Jack's gut. So Jack reluctantly agrees with Wuya, and they decide to recruit this mime to their cause. In the meantime, the Xiaolin monks and Jack and co. manage to make their way to where the Fist of Tebigong is, which is basically in a mountain range. Which is basically just in a mountain range. It's kind of generic, mostly grasslands, but ultimately their search leads them there, and upon both groups arriving in the mountain range, immediately they get to fighting as Jack summons his Jackbots, and as such, Kimiko, Omi, and Raimundo use their various abilities in Shengang Wu to start dealing with all the robots, while Clay, well, he's just kind of prepping himself, getting himself kind of breathing, getting in the moment, but before he can even throw a punch, what Jackbot managed to throw him off the mountain. Thankfully, he's fine because he landed on a branch, but in the meantime, the other three Xiaolin monks deal with all of Jack's robots. However, it's here where Jack and Wuya bring out the mime, called Le Mime, and, well, Le Mime showcases his abilities as he immediately pretends to trap the three Xiaolin monks in a box. And then actually does, which surprises them completely, but it's a very solid box. No door, no exit, they're just trapped, and they have absolutely no idea how to get out. As such, with the good guys taken care of, Jack decides that he should go off and look for the Fist of Tebigong, while Le Mime just kind of gives them a little hat-off farewell as he follows after. In the meantime, Clay managed to make his way up the mountain, and he finds the three Xiaolin monks as they're struggling to get out of the box. And for whatever reason, no sound seems to be able to escape the box, even though clearly air can escape the box, because otherwise the three would have suffocated. And as such, while there is some difficulty, the monks manage to tell Clay that they're trapped inside the box, and that the one that did it was Le Mime, mostly utilizing Kimiko's, well, I don't want to say phone. I don't know. It's a pad. I forget what it's called. Point is, she's able to give him a message utilizing one of her pieces of tech, and basically Clay realizes that he's the last line of defense, and he needs to find the Fist of Tebigong as quickly as possible. And since we've established that the three monks think that he's an idiot because he doesn't do all the flippy kicks and shit that they do, they think that they're screwed. As such, Raimundo, Kimiko, and Omi continue trying to find ways out of the box, with Omi even utilizing his Tsunami Strike to try and break through it, but the walls are too sturdy. In the meantime, Jack and Wuya continue scouring the mountain, and while Clay does have a brief run-in with Le Mime, he managed to beat him because Le Mime tried using the mirror gag, so Clay just punched himself in the face and knocked the mime out. Either way, going back to Jack and Wuya, as Jack is using his Jackbox to literally just rip apart the mountain, Clay and Dojo are just wondering what the hell they need to do, but, well, after a trip causes Dojo to come tumbling down the mountain, he manages to find the Fist of Tebigong in a quarry of rocks. Unfortunately, Jack managed to find him, because when he fell off the mountain, he made quite a bit of noise, and so Clay has to immediately make a run for it as he slides down the mountain, grabs the Fist of Tebigong, and just bolts. Unfortunately, Jack managed to get the Fist of Tebigong away from Clay thanks to the third arm sash, and after Jack decides to gloat a bit about how Clay is a failure, how he never anticipated to meet the might of Jack Spicer and all that crap, Clay uses the Eye of Dashi to just short out all of his robots, immediately causes Jack to freak out where he accidentally throws the Fist of Tebigong, and so as Jack and Clay jump to make a grab for it, they both grab it at the same time, and, well, Shengang Wu glows, and that means it's time for a Xiaolin showdown. However, back with the other heroes, pretty much after they've tried everything, basically as the trio of other Xiaolin monks have tried everything they could to get out of the box, Raimundo finally decides, you know what, fuck it, I'm not too proud to beg, and so he pulls out the Mantis flip coin and just says, hey, Mr. Mime Guy, let us out, we think mimes are charming and funny and not all stupid, as he begins ringing the coin along the box's invisible bars, which does annoy Omi and Kimiko, until they realize something. The box has bars, which is strange considering that a moment ago it was supposed to be solid all the way around. And so the three of them are confused until they realize something. Apparently, while Le Mime has the power to create the invisible objects from nothing, once they appear in existence, you can alter them with your imagination. And in this case, since Raimundo imagined that the box had bars, it suddenly had bars, which means that if they can imagine a door being there, they have an escape route. And sure enough, Omi imagines said door, and the three manage to get out, just in time to find Clay and Jack fighting over the Fist of Tebigong, and Jack challenging Clay to a Xiaolin showdown. The game this time there's a blue robin is on the mountain. Basically, whoever can catch the robin first will lay claim to the Fist of Tabigong, and likewise the other person's Shengang Wu. With Clay, of course, accepting the challenge, much to the chagrin of the other Xiaolin monks. But either way, Xiaolin showdown time. And again, we are showcased just how awesome these things are as the mountain range turns into a kind of pseudo arena with the little area that Jack and Clay are in suddenly rising up to the ground, and the floor fauna suddenly growing bigger, while the other Xiaolin monks get hoisted onto their own platform. And this is also another little thing that I find fun, that I find interesting. Apparently, the thing is, something I forgot to mention, when the Xiaolin monks go looking for Shengang Wu, they swap out their monk robes for their casual wear. And so likewise, that's the wear that they were wearing throughout this episode. With kind of funny thing with Kimiko being that she always has a different outfit every episode. However, when the Xiaolin showdown kicks in, all the Xiaolin monks end up swapping over to their robes, which I kind of find which I kind of like. It's a nice way of identifying who the good guys and the bad guys are. But either way, back to the showdown with the yell of Gong Yi Tum Pai, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, but that's how they say ready, set, go. Immediately, Jack makes a run. Jack immediately jumps into action as he gets his jetpack ready and he tries catching the Robin, which is just outflying him. However, once again, Clay is just kind of standing there, taking deep breaths, focusing himself, and the other monks think that essentially they're screwed. Jack's the one actively going after the bird while Clay is just doing nothing. However, there is logic to his madness, as Clay goes over to a patch of wildflowers, and he begins pulling out seeds and putting them in his hat, which does surprise everyone and wonder, is he just getting a flower arrangement ready? But back with Jack, while he tries catching the Robin with his third arm sash, well, again, the Robin is not just going to stand by and let this weird kid with a jetpack grab it, and likewise, Jack, in the midst of his fumbling, ends up flying into a tree. However, well, we see the logic in. You see the method in Clay's madness as we see the bird fly to Clay's hand and just start eating the seeds out of the hat, with Clay telling the Robin to just enjoy the grub. So, technically speaking, Clay won the showdown. He caught the Robin, and as such, everything returns to normal as Clay not only lays claim to the Fist of Tabigong, but also Jack's third arm sash, with the monks finally cheering for Clay since he won the day. As such, the episode ends as all the monks fly away on Dojo, happy that they've got the Fist of Tabigong, with Clay saying that they've all learned a valuable lesson. Nobody likes mimes, and thus they all laugh as they fly into the sunset. So, there you go, that's the episode. So, my thoughts on it. Well, first, let's talk about let's look at the episode from a world-building standpoint. Like I said, the first episode of Xiaolin Showdown laid down the groundwork for the rest of the series to build on. We got the basic dynamics set up, but by virtue of that episode kind of feeling a bit rushed, they didn't really have a lot of time to build up from that. It's just a way of setting everything in motion for the rest of the series to, well, pick up on later. And this is the episode where things start picking up as this episode starts further establishing group dynamics with everyone. In this case, we see that the Xiaolin monks are becoming more familiar with one another and thus are building somewhat of a rapport. Case in point, one of those examples of building a rapport is Omi, as now that he's kind of working alongside people who've actually grown up in the outside world, he starts trying to adopt more of the modern lingo, so to speak. Like he tries saying, "You stink," or "talk to the hand," and all that stuff, but he doesn't quite get it, because in Omi's case, he takes things very literally, and so when he tries to use metaphor and use modern slang, or modern as the early 2000s was, he doesn't really get it. Like when he tries saying "talk to my hand," he says "talk to my fingers," or when he tries saying "I stink," he actually says "I smell bad." He doesn't really understand it. And yes, it is a running gag throughout the series. Omi tries to be more hip and modern, but he doesn't fully get it. He's more like, again, Omi's a Xiaolin monk. He's good at punching, kicking, and kicking ass, but when it comes down to trying to be a regular person, that's where he stumbles and falters, and that's ultimately one of Omi's dynamics. But it does lead to some honestly good, funny character dynamics, because, well, hold on one second. Sorry, dog doing cute dog stuff. But my point like I said, because Omi is so sheltered and trying to expand his horizons, so to speak, it does lead to some honestly funny group dynamics as we see him kind of being the butt of the joke, while at other times also being the wisest of them all. Case in point, when the Xiaolin monks were fighting Jack Spicer's robots, Raimundo tries rubbing in Omi's face that he's got the Mantis Slip Coin while Omi has jack shit, but Omi immediately throws that back in Raimundo's face because he says that, well, no, it's a yes, I would love to have it, but clearly you need it more because Omi is more skilled with these sorts of things. Which, the episode also further establishes that the Xiaolin monks are, well, training in their respective elements. As something I didn't really mention when I was talking about the first episode is that when Omi and Ko first encountered Jack Spicer, we got this little kind of clip of Omi yelling water as we saw what looked like the kanji for water, probably the Chinese one, as they're while he was surrounded by waves of water before we cut back to him actually fighting. Most likely him employing his preferred fighting style since he's a Xiaolin Dragon of Water. But likewise, it's clear that at this point, Raimundo, Kimiko, and Clay have also begun training in their respective elements because Raimundo and Kimiko both have similar things for wind and fire. And again, while they don't really do any but they don't pull out any special elemental powers with the exception of Omi with his Tsunami Strike, it's clear that they are starting to get more into it. After they call out their respective elements, the fighting styles don't really seem to look any different than their regular fighting styles. Maybe I'm not picking up on it because I don't know the specifics of specific fighting styles and what have you. So for all I know, maybe the specifics of what they're doing are flying right over my head, but it's clear that they've at least gotten more training in these things because now they can at least do what Omi does with calling out their respective elements and getting into the game. So to that, it's at least fine, so to speak. And then likewise, kind of going on more character building, I like that the episode further establishes more of these characters and how they operate. Like I said, going back to how further establishing how Omi is trying to become more modern, so to speak, as he tries getting in on the in-jokes and so forth. We also get more development for, oddly enough, Raimundo, as we further establish how much of a kind of a doofus he is, as he still kind of acts like an arrogant, snarky jerk when around the group, and while he does like to poke fun at Omi because Omi is less weary of the world, so to speak, at the same time, we also further establish that he does actually take the job seriously. Oh yes, he will have fun with it and will mess around when he thinks he can get away with it. But when it actually comes down to the job itself, he does take it seriously. He is still trying to take it seriously. In the case of Kimiko, sadly, I don't think much is established with her beyond what we already saw in the first episode, but I will say that it does further showcase how fun she is, especially when in the Xiaolin monk's attempts to get out of the box, she actually throws Raimundo right into a wall just because he's annoying her, which, again, I love her. She's fun. So again, like I said, it does still further establish more of their group dynamics and how they're growing as both characters and a team. But of course, if we want to get to further character growth, we need to talk about Clay, because it's clear that this episode is primarily focused on him. And ultimately, while we see his interactions with the group grow as well, the main priority with him is how he operates as a character. Now, like I said when I looked at the first episode, Clay clearly came across as the strong, stalwart type, the kind that kind of sits and waits and is ready to strike when he believes it's necessary. And this episode further builds on that archetype as we see him further practicing what he preaches. Case in point, before he gets into battle at all, he essentially has to center himself. Now, I don't think this comes up a lot in other episodes, because usually he just goes into battle guns blazing for other episodes. But in this case, before he goes to fight Jack's robots, before he started the obstacle course, hell, even before he started actually engaging in the Xiaolin showdown, he just takes a moment and collects himself. And while he does say that he's centering his chi, I like to think this is him kind of thinking things over, essentially analyzing the situation and figuring out what the proper course of action is if he wants to go forth. Which, while he doesn't really get a chance to do that when fighting Jack's robots when he and the group arrive on the mountains, when it comes down to the showdown and the obstacle course, both times he immediately finds the proper solution. Case in point, when he does the obstacle course, he kind of tells himself, okay, the end goal is get the dog, right? So I just go get that dog. And so, he just went around and grabbed it. And in the case of the showdown, because he took a moment to kind of compose himself and analyze the situation, he realized that if he tried chasing the Robin the same way that Jack was, he'd probably just fall on his face and ultimately fail in this whole endeavor. Especially since Jack does have the aerials to his advantage with his jetpack, and he has the third arm sash. So as such, Clay decides to go a different angle. In this case, if he can't catch the Robin, then he'll get the Robin to come to him as he fills up his hat with seeds, which of course the Robin wants to eat. So again, it further showcases character strength, or Clay's strength as a character. Sorry, tongue-tied there. As we see that, yeah, he may be able to, he may be slow, but when you're slower, you have to rely on other things to get by. And yes, he is still strong. He's still buff, and he can still fight. But the thing is, when you have certain handicaps as a character, the best way you can write a character like that is them trying to find ways around said handicaps. And like I said, since Clay is slow, he has to be smart. And I do kind of like that. He's not just a dumb cowboy who just likes to punch things really hard. He instead likes to analyze the situation. And it further helps develop Clay's character because it showcases how he typically approaches regular problems. Like I said, as they said in the episode, simple solutions to complicated problems. And we see that practiced throughout the episode. Especially with Le Mime, as when the three other Xiaolin monks were trapped in his box, they were trying to brute force their way out. They tried smacking the box's walls, doing everything they could to try and get this thing to knock down. But then they finally realized, when they figured out that the box reacted to their thoughts and imaginations, they realized that they could manipulate it. And ultimately, the solution they came up with for getting out of the box was just give themselves a door. A very easy solution to find to this whole scenario. So, again, I do like that. And I do believe that the lesson is a good one for kids to learn. That sometimes when you approach problems, you shouldn't come at it guns blazing. You shouldn't just run in and expect a quick solution or a quick solution. That sometimes, if you take a moment to just stop and think, you can find that even the most complicated problems can have the simplest of solutions, which I like. It's nice, and it kind of is a nice way of teaching kids how to be analytical, to think things through, and I like that. It's a good lesson. And again, actually kind of having that lesson be portrayed by Clay is nice. Again, it does a great job at further showcasing his strengths as a character, further developing him as a character as we see how he approaches problems, and ultimately the lesson itself is still really nice, and I do think it's something that kids could stand to learn. On top of that, this episode also, going back to world building, this episode also further establishes one of the formulas that Xiaolin Showdown likes to use. Namely, a villain of the week formula. Now, while Jack, Spicer, and Wuya are typically the foes that the Xiaolin monks will face day to day, episode to episode, there are times when Jack and Wuya do get help from outside sources. And typically, while some villains don't tend to appear a lot throughout the series, like maybe appear once or twice, they do typically like to swap out the villains who show up from episode to episode. Case in point, this episode introduced Le Mime, and there's really nothing to him. When it comes down to it, Le Mime is an obstacle in the purest sense. He's there to get in the Xiaolin monk's way and then be tossed aside to make way for the real villains, which again is Jack, Spicer, and Wuya. He helps impart the whole lesson as he trapped Omi, Kimiko, and Raimundo in the box, and likewise when Clay encountered him, again, it further showcased more of his strengths because, well, he started realizing that the mime was using the mirror gag when encountering him, so he thought, okay, if he's copying everything I do, then what happens if I punch myself in the face as hard as I could? Which, yeah, because Clay's tough, he could take the punch, whereas with the mime, he stumbled and fell, again, he's just, when it comes down to Le Mime, he's just an obstacle of the week. So really nothing else to it. But again, if I want to get more into the villains' dynamics, this episode helps further develop Jack and Wuya's relationship, and it's it very much showcases that their alliance is an alliance of convenience. In the case of Jack, he goes along with Wuya's whole plan because, as we established, he wants to take over the world, and the Shingon Wu, he thinks, might be an easy solution to that, especially when he got the third arm out, he just started playing with it. And so he needs Wuya if he wants to find them. And then likewise, like I said, because Wuya is a ghost, she still has to rely on Jack to be her arms and legs, so to speak. But it's clear that their relationship is very tumultuous. Wuya does not like the fact that Jack doesn't take the whole take over the world job as seriously as she does. Jack treats it all like it's a game that he wants to win, but a game nonetheless, and she clearly doesn't like it. And so likewise, while she does occasionally like to play along with the villain stereotypes that you would associate with bad guys, like gloating a little bit and showing off, especially when she and Jack introduced Le Mime, she doesn't really like how lax and laid back Jack is treating everything. Mostly because she knows that if they wait too long, the good guys will get the Fisted Tebby Gong first, and this whole trip will be for nothing. And she doesn't want that. She wants world domination, whereas Jack Spicer is just treating this like a leisurely stroll through the mountains. You can kind of tell that that her patience is not limitless in that regard. But Jack, he's just overconfident about this whole thing. When he gets a Vista Tebby Gong and has Clay at his mercy, he starts mocking him and saying, "Oh, we have time to gloat," which ironically gives Clay enough time to pull out the Eye of Dashi and zap all his robots, which, another little thing, this episode introduced a variant of the Jackbots, as these Jackbots have literal drills for arms and legs, so already threatening. But in that same regard, we see that while their end goals are the same, how they reach that goal kind of results in Jack and Wuya clashing. Especially with and while Jack thinks he's secure in his place as Wuya's right-hand man because, well, he's the one that does all the work, and there's probably not a lot of other people who are looking for Shingon Wu. He just kind of tells Wuya, "Well, what are you going to do? You're going to replace me?" And Wuya just kind of briefly considers it, which, again, it's probably a hint for the future, but ultimately, yeah, it further establishes that their relationship is kind of sort of tumultuous. And, well, like I said, their relationship exists more for the convenience of the people involved rather than actually formed by mutual bonds of respect and trust. So, and in that regard, it further builds on the villains, and ultimately does lay the groundwork for future episodes and their interactions. But of course, if there's one other thing I probably should talk about, it should be the new Shingon Wu. Now, we don't see the Fist of Tebby Gong in action in this episode, but at the same time, there's also the third arm sash. It's a pretty cool Shingon Wu. Like I said, it was a Shingon Wu just found off screen, most likely introduced just so that Jack would have a Shingon Wu for the eventual Xiaolin showdown. But it's a cool one. We don't see, like I said, and likewise, it is cool to see the Eye of Dashi actually be used, especially since the last episode, when it was introduced, we never actually saw anyone use it, as the most it did was act as the precursor for Jack and Omi's Xiaolin showdown. So, in that regard, so, again, it's still some cool stuff, and I like seeing it. But, and of course, we got some fun action. Oh, one other thing I should probably mention. Yeah, this episode further establishes one of the main gimmicks for Xiaolin Showdown. It likes to be anime-esque in its humor. It likes to be over-exaggerated, kind of cartoony in some regards. And how that's showcased is typically how the characters interact. Like I mentioned, we already got some slapstick with Kimiko throwing Raimundo right into the walls of the box they were trapped in. But once the trio do get out of the box and they start patting themselves on the back, we do get another overly exaggerated gag from Raimundo. Because as he gets out, he says, "Oh yes, it's nice to have this bonding experience, but I think we forgot one thing." Before his head just grows really big as he shouts at them about how Clay is losing the Fist of Tebby Gong to Jack Spicer. Which, again, this is your reminder that this is a kid's show, and they like to kind of go overly exaggerate for some things, which, I'll admit, the humor in that regard can be kind of mixed. Sometimes it really hits home, sometimes it feels too over-exaggerated. It doesn't, like, the ones that definitely hit more than the ones that miss, but it is something noticeable. I will at least mention that. So, yeah, that's a thing. But ultimately, like I said, the episode itself, is all right. It's still enjoyable. Like I said, the series is still clearly getting its footing, still trying to figure out where it wants to go from here and how it's going to progress. But as an episode kind of building off from what happened in the first one, it's, I think, enjoyable. Like I said, it further establishes the group dynamics as we see everyone interacting with one another. I do like that we get to further establish characters and how they interact. I like more of the world building, both for the good guys and the bad guys, especially with the Xiaolin monks and where they keep the Shen Gong Wu. I like that we get hints towards the future. I like that we're setting up the formula for later episodes to follow. And likewise, it's nice that, Likewise, the lesson with Clay and how he approaches problems, I think is a good moral for kids to learn, as it not only further establishes Clay's character, but it's a nice little lesson that kids can learn, that sometimes what may look like this big, overly complicated problem might have the simplest solution if you stop and think for a minute. So again, I like that. Throw in some honestly fun action from the main characters, and on the whole, I think this is an enjoyable episode. It's, again, not perfect, still clearly getting its footing, but it's still entertaining in its own right, and I think I still like it, so yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you next week. Take care.